Welcome to West Virginia University College of Law. I'm thrilled to have all of you with us today for our inaugural event in our program, Women in Law and Leadership. I want to take a few minutes to just do a little bit of housekeeping, which is that at 1 o'clock, some students may have to leave to attend class. We will go, however, until 1:15, and we will stop and have plenty of time for questions. I'm sorry those of you who have to leave. You'll be able to watch the rest of it on the webinar. On behalf of the West Virginia University College of Law, I thank you for being here today to help us in this inaugural event to launch the College of Law's Women in Law and Leadership Initiative. This is sparked by a downward trend in the number of women applying to and attending law school, and the evidence that fewer women remain in the profession long enough to be reflected in the number of partners, chief executive officers, and leadership positions in private practice, business, government, and nonprofit legal services organizations. We, the College of Law community, have decided to be proactive in focusing on the opportunities available to women as lawyers and leaders, and to provide inspiration to all those women who are thinking about a life in the law. I am delighted today to introduce our most amazing panelists. This is a great honor for me, and I want to thank them collectively before I begin individual introductions, to thank you all so much for taking time to be with us here today. This is an extraordinarily successful panel of women, and it truly is my great honor. I'm going to just very briefly introduce each one of them because I've asked them to prepare remarks to personalize their introductions and to say something about themselves before we begin the actual questions for the panel. Immediately to my right is Susan S. Brewer, who is the CEO of the very well-known law firm of Steptoe & Johnson. Susan is a wonderful CEO of Steptoe & Johnson, but also I would be remiss if I did not say she's an extraordinary friend of the law school, as is the firm Steptoe & Johnson, and I very much appreciate that. Catherine Dodd Combs is sitting to her immediate right, and she is a graduate, an alumna of the College of Law. I'm not going to tell any dates on anyone. I think that that's part of being polite and gracious. But it comes to us as the former Vice President, Corporate Secretary, and Deputy General Counsel of Exelon Corporation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Exelon, it is a huge corporation that focuses particularly on the generation of energy through nuclear power. Sitting immediately to her right is the Honorable Irene M. Keeley, United States District Court, Northern District of West Virginia, also an amazing one of our alumna. And again, no dates, but what I do want to say is that she was at Steptoe & Johnson, and I think she'll talk a little bit about that experience, and then became a federal judge, and she has been an incredible partner to the law school as well, in that she has hosted and had many of our law students as her clerks and helped launch their careers. And sitting next to her immediately on the right is Barbara Groves Maddox, who is the Director of Tax Policy and Senior Tax Counsel at General Electric. And I don't think General Electric needs much of an introduction, but it is quite amazing. She is also one of our alums and has succeeded to become the Senior Tax Counsel at General Electric, one of our largest international companies. So thank you all very much for being here, and we're going to begin to my right with Susan Brewer with a very brief introduction.
Thank you, Joyce. I've heard the old saying, I'm not from West Virginia, but I got here as soon as I could. I have been in West Virginia 31 years, but I was born and raised in Virginia, and I went to college at Duke University and then to George Mason University School of Law in Arlington, Virginia, where I met my husband, who was a WVU alum, and he convinced me it was an easy sell to move to Morgantown, and that's how I got here almost 31 years ago. By way of other background, I was the oldest of 3 children, and my father was a trial lawyer. And he many times would drag us to federal court to hear him argue appeals. And oftentimes we had to go in front of the judge and bow and curtsy. And so I guess the good news is that that made me comfortable with a courtroom, even as a very young child. I was also fortunate that I had a mother and a grandmother, neither of whom worked, but somehow they instilled in me and my sister the notion that we needed to work, that we needed to have a career, we needed to be able to take care of ourselves, and we needed to pursue something that we were really passionate about. So I was very lucky. I rebuffed the idea of law school for many, many years because I didn't want people to think I was just doing what my father did. And finally, one of our family friends said, "What's wrong with you? You need to go to law school." So I finally applied and went to law school. One of the other benefits I had along the way, and I'll thank my father for this, is he many times dragged me to his law firm, which was a very small law firm. But whenever somebody was absent or on vacation or maternity leave or whatever, I had to go fill in for that person. And this was usually over holidays and summers. And so by the time I went to college, I had worked just about every job a law firm offers, except for being an attorney. I'd been the bookkeeper, I'd been the secretary, I'd been the receptionist, I'd been a paralegal, I'd been an office manager, I had done everything. So when I completed law school, it made sense to me to go into litigation. That's what I was used to, that's what I was comfortable with, and I joined Steptoe & Johnson 2 weeks out of law school and have stayed my entire career. I think what happened to me along the way was not a plan. I did not have a 5-year plan. I did not have a 10-year plan. I had no plan. My plan was just to do the best I possibly could as a practicing attorney, be a good wife, be a good mother, be good at everything I could, and somehow all of this would work out. I was thrust into a leadership role at my firm probably before I was ready, but Irene can attest to this story. We decided, many of us were young at the firm, and we wanted some young people on the governing committee, and a couple of us didn't step up. As Irene told me when she looked at me, she said, "You have to do this." So I did it. Did I plan to become CEO of the firm? Absolutely not. Again, I just plotted my path of being a good litigator and being a good leader in the firm. I served on the executive committee for 16 years before I took over as CEO, so that when it came time for a change of CEO at the firm, luckily the prior CEO gave us a lot of notice when he was going to finish his term. I was able to think about it for almost a year before I said, okay, I'll do it. I had to run for election, which was kind of distasteful, but I did. So I was a little bit unwilling, I guess you would say. It's not that I didn't want to do it, it's just I wasn't sure I was ready, you know, all of the self-doubt that you usually have. But I knew I had worked in leadership positions in the firm. I knew I had had leadership positions in college. I was loyal to my firm. My partners were loyal to me. They trusted me, and that's really what led me to the decision to go on in leadership and become the CEO. I think leadership by example is probably what I have practiced, and leadership by dedication, and that has served me well. I know there's other paths to get to where I am, but that is the path I followed, and probably the best thing I had going for me was that I wasn't afraid. Thank you.
Can you hear me here? Being a good in-house corporate lawyer, when someone says, do a PowerPoint, we do a PowerPoint. So what I put together really was just an introduction with sort of the highlights and the changing parts of my career. My father, too, was a lawyer, as was my grandfather and great-great-grandfather. The family name is Kenna, not Dodd, and so it was a very strong political family in West Virginia going years and years back. I was the first woman to work in our family, no less the first woman lawyer. So I shared many of my colleagues' career path in that respect. Let me just pull this over here. Key, I think, to because I didn't have a female role model as a lawyer. My family were Nazis about academic performance. In fact, you didn't belong if you didn't get A's. I found that out early in 5th grade when I came home with straight C's. There was a family council meeting in which I was brought to task and said, perhaps you are unaware of this. You need to come back with A's next time. The other key factor, I think, in my career was I was very involved in musical theater, and I could sing or dance before you more readily than I could give you an oral argument in the old days. Unfortunately, my talent was only so large, and I quickly realized that I'd rather get A's in history at Northwestern than D's in ear training in the music school at Northwestern. D's I knew would not make it in my family. So majored in history at Northwestern, but during the 60s, I didn't have plans to attend law school. I got an almighty B average, which I thought was good enough for anybody, but it turned out not to be very competitive in the market for postgraduate education. West Virginia University accepting me was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I remembered again that I needed to make A's. And again, I was set on a successful path. I was the first woman to be hired by Jackson Kelly, I was told at the time, as a summer associate. And I wasn't that comfortable being the first woman. I don't know if they were that comfortable having a woman either. So the next year I looked for a larger city and a larger law firm, and that was Philadelphia. Pepper Hamilton had women lawyers, women partners. I got to do just what I wanted to do, which was learn to be a lawyer and not have to think about when I walked into a room what everybody else was thinking. Not that Jackson Kelly feels that way now, but it was a different time. After I had practiced litigation, and in law school, you think you're going to be a litigator. That's sort of what you're taught. And I learned litigation. I loved litigation. But when I wanted to have children, I thought, these are long hours, so maybe I'll try in-house. And the general counsel at the time said to me, we want you to be in regulatory. I said, what's regulatory? I don't know that. It's economics, and it's really sounds boring. Why would I want to do that? He said, that's where we make our money. That was the key to my career going forward. Find the place where the corporation makes the money and involve yourself there. So I became a regulatory attorney for Bell of Pennsylvania, and we increased the rates of our customers 3 times in 3 years. So we were very successful. Not as popular with the consumers, I'm sure, but that became our job. When I was pregnant with my first child, I took a regular sabbatical leave of absence and had been told that my next promotion opportunity would be 5 years from then. And I said, in 5 years, I will never have seen this child grow up. So I made the choice for me. I quit. I worked a little bit part-time at home, and I just said, I'll see you later. And I turned out to be out for 8 years. I had a second child and went back to work. That's a family sabbatical. I went back to work when I got divorced, and I really needed the money. And that has been the best part of having a legal degree that I can tell you about. With a law degree and 3 or 4 years of experience, I was very marketable, even after having taken 8 years out and no CLE and no nothing. Didn't attend a conference. I came back and bargained hard for exactly the amount of money I needed, and then the career started up again. So my regulatory experience at the telephone company was immediately transferable to an electric company, also going through deregulation. Next point was when I was asked to be corporate secretary. I said again, what's a corporate secretary? Found out that it's, last time I thought about bylaws was right here. First-year contracts. I never thought I'd need to know any of that. It turned out to be a specialty of mine. It became an officer-level position, puts you on the rung of vice president, and the rising tide floats all boats. Compensation followed. Great corporate opportunities. Great career path for women in management in corporations today. I was promoted to senior vice president several years ago before my retirement. And post-retirement, this was a networking organization for corporate secretaries, the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals. During my course as corporate secretary, I involved myself, it's the equivalent of the ABA for corporate secretaries. I involved myself with that association, got on their board, became chair of the board, and then when they were looking for a new CEO, I chaired the succession committee and served as interim CEO of that organization, which has now catapulted me into international corporate governance, and I just returned from Shanghai. We're writing international corporate governance principles where I'm the U.S. representative. So who knew where this career would end, or if it ever ends, but I'm enjoying it very much. And I'm pleased to be here, and thank you, Dean McConnell, for inviting me.
It's completely up to you. You can remain seated or use the podium.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, I'm Irene Keeley, and I, too, am the daughter of a lawyer. My father was an attorney. He was the first attorney in our family, a good old Irish family that came up through New York. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and went through a very traditional Catholic elementary school education, a public high school education, and then a Catholic college education, from which point I became a school teacher. I wanted to go right on to law school. I'd spent my whole life growing up arguing with my father about everything I could think of to argue about, and then being told to go wash the dishes after dinner. I'm one of 5. The boys didn't have to wash the dishes for some reason. But in any case, I had a scholarship in college, and I had to pay back 2 years of teaching service, which turned out to probably be the best preparation for becoming a lawyer that I had. I actually, in my second year of teaching, applied to Georgetown Law School and was accepted, and was beginning in the fall of '67 as a first-year law student in a class with 5 women at the old Red Building in downtown Washington, D.C. But I had met a fabulous person named Jack Healy, who was from West Virginia, and where was that? And didn't even last a semester in law school, so I'm a great failure, okay? I left before the full tuition had to be paid because I was paying it, and then I was married a year later and moved to West Virginia. My husband was always very supportive of the glimmer in my eye to go to law school, but I lived in Clarksburg, and Clarksburg required a long, circuitous drive up Route 19 to, or other paths to get to Morgantown. So there really wasn't an opportunity to think about going to law school. And candidly, who thought about law school when you just had a baby and you were raising a family and your husband was a contractor and spent many, many days, including weeks, away from home on the job? The job in our family has capital letters with quotes around it. But I did have to get a master's degree to continue teaching. I was teaching in West Virginia. I've always worked. And so finally, instead of doing the 3 hours a semester bit at Jackson, what am I trying to say, down in Lewis County? Jackson's Mill. Jackson's Mill, thank you very much, from the other non-West Virginia. I decided to take a year off teaching and to go full-time and get my master's degree. I-79, for those of you who think it's been here since the flood, had just been completed from Bridgeport to Morgantown. So I was driving back and forth every day, and my oldest child and then only child was in grade school. So, and that was pretty wrenching for her because I had actually taught as a substitute teacher part of the time at her school, but I was really a high school teacher. So then my husband, Jack, said to me, you can go to law school. You know you can do this. We've survived as a family this year while you've been finishing up your master's. And I looked at him and I said, you don't have a clue what law school is going to be like. Do you ever want to see me again? And he said, we can do this. We can do this. So off I go, and I came up. And then Associate Dean John Fisher, and I'll never forgive him for this, said, well, you have to take your LSATs again. And I was like, I have to do what? He said, aren't they any good? And he said, you have to take them again. They're just too old. Well, that's not really what the case was. He told me many years later over a drink that he didn't think that I was that serious about the whole thing. Is he here? No. Well, anyway, it was pretty good that he made me do it because it made me think, do I really want to go through the LSATs again? How many of you here would like to take them the second or third time? You know? So anyway, I did. In one of the worst snowstorms that I can ever remember, I drove up to Pennsylvania and took them and then was admitted. And when I came up in the spring, I think I was just checking things out. You know who I saw in here? I saw Dave Romano and Marcia now Broughton, who had been my high school students. I mean, it was kind of humiliating. You know, I was now in my early 30s. I was 32, and I'm going to be coming into law school, and they were walking out the door, swaggering. You know, oh, it's Irene Keeley. Oh my God, what are you doing here? So anyway, but then in my second year of law school, while I was on law review and moot court, we had to do both then. Actually, it was not really much of a choice. If you did one, you usually did the other. I found out I was pregnant, and that was after being told I couldn't have any more children. So for those of you who may be worried about never having any more children, try law school. It's a great fertility incentive. And if I counted back correctly, the wonderful event actually occurred on the night before my income tax exam. Not. Anyway, fast forward to third year law school. I'm still on law review. I've had a child, and trying to get through third year law school and figure out what to do. Well, I had clerked in the summer for Steptoe & Johnson, which was the largest firm in Clarksburg, had liked it very much, and had been fortunate enough to have a job offer made to me even while I was 8 months pregnant during that summer. And believe me, they had never had a pregnant summer clerk, much less lawyer there. So just to make things better for them, I got pregnant again. And in my second year of law school, I had to go into my mentor, who was a fine litigator. He also mentored Susan, Herb Underwood. I don't think he would know that he mentored us, but he did, didn't he? And said, oh, you'll never guess what's happened. And he said, what? And I said, well, I'm pregnant again. And at that point in time, Susan hasn't told the story, but the firm had to scramble to come up with a pregnancy policy, which was basically, here was the planning. If you want 5-year planning, what do you want? How much time off do you need? And I said 3 months. And Susan just told me today that is still the pregnancy policy at Steptoe & Johnson. So think about all that corporate planning that went into that pregnancy policy. I had a career path there as a litigator. And I'm not going to say that it was just wonderful. It wasn't. There were weekends and nights, and my husband kept saying, does this get any better? And I just kind of looked at him. And finally, when Susan and I both made partner, I remember Jack saying to me, well, it's going to get better now, isn't it? You're partner. You don't have to worry about making partner anymore. And I said, no, now I have to worry about getting clients and making money. And law firms have several models for pay, but one of the more traditional and popular is you eat what you kill. You all heard that term before? So at Steptoe at that time, I don't know about now, we ate what we killed, so we were all out looking for clients, and I see a former client here. And actually, my career path went from straight litigation to a modified litigation plan of building a healthcare practice for the firm, which worked out very well. And during the course of that, I met and became pretty active in the campaign of Senator Rockefeller. So fast forward a few years, after some networking in the community and in local politics, I learned of an opportunity for the federal bench. And it depends on what the president's administration is looking for. But at that time, President George H.W. Bush, 41, was looking for women to put on the bench. And I was a Republican in a state that had very few Republicans, and a woman Republican to boot. And so, being the non-shy person, I put my name in. You don't have, some women and men may be very fortunate to have them come running saying, you are the dream federal judge, and please, please say yes. I put my name in among many others who put their name in, and it was a long, circuitous road that eventually, a couple of years later, led to my appointment in August of 1992. So I have been on the federal bench since August of 1992, and attribute the happiness that I have experienced in my present position to the great training I received here at the College of Law and later in the firm of Steptoe and Johnson. One of the things that was drilled into us at Steptoe and Johnson was, you better be prepared. And if you're going to go in the courtroom, you better know the other side's case better than you know your own. Am I right? And probably one of the things that lawyers who appear in front of me hate about me, there are several, but would be that since that's the way I was trained, I expect that that's the way the lawyers are trained. And if that doesn't happen in the courtroom, then sometimes they're very quizzical with me and say, why are you asking that question? And it's just, it was the training that we received as litigators, the discipline that came with all of that. So as I pass the microphone on, I would just say to all of you, there's no plan to get to where I got to. In fact, there were failures along the way, there were changes along the way, and there was a lot of struggle just to juggle family. Susan had 4 children. I had 3 children. But it can be done. I didn't take any time off. In retrospect, that would have been a very good thing, but I think I was at a point in my career and in the kind of firm I was in where that really wouldn't have been too acceptable. 3 months was what you got when you had a baby, and I was grateful for that. I think things have progressed, but I still think that Eat What You Kill model is out there. And for women, it can be a challenge because if you don't grow the business, if you don't have clients, the partnership track may not be something that is available to you, and it's so much longer now than it used to be. But thank you very much, and Dean, I want to thank you as well for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Hello, last on the panel. My name's Barbara Maddox. I graduated from the law school here in 1978. And it's a very deep pleasure to be back here. I'm probably the one member of the panel whose father was not a lawyer. I grew up, in fact, I was the first lawyer in the family. I grew up on a dairy farm in Canvas, West Virginia, which is just a little bit outside of Summersville, which gives you some orientation. My mother was a high school English teacher. Growing up, my dearest wish was to also be a farmer. I wanted to run the dairy business. My father explained to me that his view of the economics of the world was that that was not going to support another generation and that I should remove myself promptly to college, which I took myself promptly to Glenville State College, which was the college that was closest to where I really wanted to be, which was being a dairy farmer. After a few years of college, my eyes got a little broader and my mind got a little wider. And I decided that perhaps he was correct, and that should not be my goal in life, to milk cows. So in deciding what I wanted to do after that, I looked at different options. I was a social studies and math major. I thought about pursuing mathematics instead of law. But I looked at law, and it looked to me that it had a lot of different paths you could go. I mean, I think I didn't go into law school thinking I wanted to be a litigator or that I particularly wanted to do a particular type of law. And I think that that actually helped with my career because it came with a way that I was, I think from that point on, open to opportunities, to taking advantage of different things that were either available or in some cases, quite frankly, fell into my lap. I became interested in tax in this very building. There was a wonderful tax professor named Tim Phillips that I took the required, I don't know if it's still required, but you had to take individual income tax was a required first-year course and fell in love with it. So from that state on, I had a sort of a subject matter that I was interested in. After law school, I clerked for Justice Neely of the West Virginia State Supreme Court, and who I realize can be quite a controversial figure. But he taught me two very valuable things that made a huge difference in my career. The first was he said that if I wanted to do tax to get my butt to New York, not exactly in those words, but close, and to be able to write and communicate, that to practice writing and to practice communicating, regardless of the subject matter, would be more important almost than the subject matter expertise. And I've come to the view that they're about tied. You have to have deep expertise in your field, and you have to be able to convey it to other people in a manner that they can understand it, for it to be valuable to both sides. So I did go after my clerkship to NYU and did an LLM in taxation, which was a wonderful experience. Left there to become a clerk at the United States Tax Court. So I was going to go to D.C. for 2 years before I returned to West Virginia, and I'm still in D.C. After my tax court clerkship, I went to the law firm of Sutherland, Asbill, and Brennan, now known, I think, as Sutherland Asbill. They just use those names, which was a large D.C. and Atlanta-based firm. I did tax there, both tax and I did tax litigation. I never thought I would be a litigator, but we had a large case for the American Bar Association endowment, and it was a tax issue, so I was sort of seconded to the litigators for a year, and it was a great experience. I'm glad I did it. The one valuable thing I learned from my litigation experience that I use to this day is always have your controversial meetings in somebody else's office, because you look quite silly marching out of your own. So I often think fondly of the senior litigator who taught me that. But thinking about things that being open to different opportunities, when I was at Sutherland Asbill, I think I was on a very good track based on the reviews and, sort of leading to partnership. But it was also the grueling big firm associate. I spent days and days in the library doing research and writing papers. The litigation part was probably the most fun of the experience. When one of my fellow associates walked in my office one day, and she said, my husband is the chief tax counsel of the Senate Finance Committee, and they're getting ready to do what was then became the 86 Tax Reform Act. And she said, he needs another tax lawyer. Would you be interested in going to work for him? And I thought, well, I talked to a few of my mentors at the firm and became, to the conclusion that it would be sort of a sidestep in my career, perhaps, and one where the remuneration would be less than what I would have expected over the next few years. But it was interesting. It seemed exciting. And I thought, maybe it leads to somewhere better than where I would go if I said yes. In a cute little story, when I went up there, I would have been working for the committee staff, but the ranking Democrat on the committee was then Russell Long of Louisiana. So I had to go meet Senator Long and was quite nervous about the interview. And I do remember I walked in his office and he said, I only have one question for you. He said, you're from West Virginia. Do you know who Matthew Neely is? Thank God I did. And he said, that's good enough for me. So that was literally the interview. The interview with the Finance Committee professional staff was much more detailed, I can assure you. So I stayed on the committee staff working on the 86 Act for 3.5 years. I did both the enactment and the immediate aftermath. Left there and got offered a partnership back at Sutherland Asbill on a much faster track, interestingly, than I would had I just stayed there. But in the meantime, the woman associate who had made me aware of this opportunity, she and 3 of the other partners had split off to form their own small firm called Davis & Harmon, and asked me to join them, so I joined them, and I was a partner there for 13 years. And it was a small firm. I think when I first went there, there were probably 6 partners and 2 associates. It was during that period that I had my 2 children. I also got to write the maternity policy, which was, I think a small firm like that, it was much less of eat what you kill. We had a pretty niche business, pretty rich client base, so it made it. I do say, too, that the advent, which was not true early in my career, of the technology that's available today made it much easier for me to do a lot of things at home that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do very early in my career, and certainly can do even more now. During the 86 Act, there was a gentleman who also worked at the Treasury Department, and the Hill staff and the Treasury people worked very closely together on legislation in the tax arena, named Rick Davino. And Rick had left after the 86 Act and gone to a large Atlanta firm, and then had gone in-house at GE. And I got a call from him one day that he was looking for a tax counsel for Genworth Financial, which was one of their subsidiary businesses. And at Davis & Harmon, I was pretty much an insurance tax expertise. I mean, you talk about getting geeky. That's about as deep as you can get. And I turned that down because I didn't particularly want to move to Richmond, which it would have required. And he said, okay. So then flash forward 2 more years forward, he called again, and he said, okay, now I have a better job for you. He said, now I need someone to lead the insurance tax function for the whole company. He said, so I don't care where you live. You can live in Washington because your companies are going to be in Munich, Richmond, St. Louis, New York, and Charlotte. So, you're going to travel, so live wherever you want. And I thought that sounded like a better job. So I took that job because I could stay in Washington. I had a son in special education situation, so that I was refusing to move in any cities. And I think, I don't regret that decision at all. One of the priorities in my life was his education, so I was going to stay wherever I had to stay. So I took that job, and it was interesting. It was a lot more travel, I think, than I had anticipated doing. But it was wonderful to be part of that whole tax team at General Electric. Well, we go through 2 more years, and I'll wrap this up a little quickly. 2 more years and talk about opportunities. GE decided to dispose of all their insurance interest. So you think, okay, now what we're going to do? So now I got a call from the same gentleman, and he said, well, you know that since you want to stay in Washington, we've never had a tax policy person based in Washington to oversee how GE interacts with the government on tax policy. Why don't you do that job? So I thought, well, okay. And we laughed to this day that had that been the job that had been offered to me at the beginning, I would not have taken it, nor would they have ever hired me to do that job. So you always kind of have to, I think, be fluid and take advantage of the opportunities and grow into them. The things that at GE we are evaluated, as is everyone in the company from the CEO on down, on what we call our growth values. And there's 6 of them. And when I've thought about my career getting ready for this panel, those 6 growth values, I think, have meant more in different stages to me, even though I didn't know they existed in that written format. And what they are external focus, always looking out, whether it's looking at the clients, what's happening in the world, what's happening in the community, being interested, being involved, being knowledgeable in everything that's going on around you and around the world. Clear thinking, that's the ability. I think the thing that I took most from law school, other than any particular expertise in a subject matter area, was the ability to analyze and think. It is a skill that is irreplaceable once you acquire it. I mean, it is worth so much. Being able to read, write, rewrite. It drives me crazy when I have someone new come who starts sending me emails and text messages with abbreviations and short term, and don't realize that anything that they write could be discoverable or publishable. The third one was imagination and courage, being able to take risk. someone comes to you and says, wouldn't you like to try to do this? You know, it's worthwhile thinking about, really thinking about doing that. That risk-taking and pushing new ideas and thinking outside the box, as much as that is a cliche, I think it's quite valuable. Inclusiveness is critical in my world. You have got to be able to work, manage without authority is what we call it internally. You have to be able to cooperate across a lot of reporting lines. I report up through the CFO of the company. Almost everybody else I work with reports to the general counsel. We have to be able to work together. Without that, my senior leader has a quote that I think sort of describes how we approach everything, and his quote is that none of us is as smart as all of us. That it's always worthwhile finding out what everybody else thinks and how they view, and take their point of view and be able to internalize that into what you're doing. And finally, expertise. We call them in GE SMEs, subject matter experts. If you can grab hold of an expertise that you are really interested in and passionate about and keyed up to date, that's invaluable in a career.
Thank you. I prepared questions and asked the panelists to consider these questions in their remarks, and some of them they've begun to touch on in their introductory comments. One of the questions that I asked them was, are you someone who actually had a 5-year plan early on in your career? I think it would be fair for me to say at this point that none of them had a 5-year plan. Would that be correct?
Yes.
That's great.
Great.
We have a 1-year plan.
A 1-year plan. So I wonder if you could just comment briefly about not having a 5-year plan, and what is it that, without having a 5-year plan, made you successful? How did you circumnavigate the difficult journey that apparently all of you have taken? Can start with anyone, and we'll work our way around.
Well, I mean, I think just what I was saying is just, I think if I had gone to a law firm and said, okay, my plans, I'm staying here 5 years, I'm going to make, we'll be here in 7 years, I'm going to be a partner, I wouldn't be where I was today. I don't think I'd be nearly as happy. I think it's just being that open to new things that might just come your way, and being willing to take the risk to step out on that board and see what happens.
I'd say not having a 5-year plan doesn't mean not networking, not working hard, not looking, being observant, seeing where the opportunities are, making sure that you're ready for opportunities. In a corporation, they merge all the time, and people lose their jobs all the time, and new people come in to manage you. So whether it may not be a 5-year plan, but being observant and noticing where the business lines are coming in and positioning yourself to be involved in those areas where the company is going to be making money. The biggest problem for an attorney in in-house corporation is being perceived as a naysayer instead of an enabler of the business. So finding the way to yes. Yes is the answer you want to be able to give your client. Yes, this is how you can do it. It may not be the way you perceived it, but finding the way to yes requires that you know your business, know the network, know the other opportunities. So it's not a planful thing, but it's certainly keeping yourself rigorous, well-trained, and capable of taking advantage of opportunities as they come around.
You can have a plan that is, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to keep my eyes wide open for opportunities, as Barbara mentioned so eloquently. If you don't have a plan, then you better keep your eyes open if you want to progress, because things are not always going to beat you over the head or smack you in the face. But it's okay to have a plan that I'm going to do my best, keep my eyes open, not be afraid, and look for opportunities to better myself and my organization. That's an okay plan.
Let me say one other thing. I think while you're thinking through where your career path is going to go, it's okay to be happy where you are. It's, I think there's an old expression, I know there's an old expression called bloom where you're planted. And it's important to do that for the very reason that we just heard, naysayers aren't very popular people in any organization. So if you can find the good in where you are, even if it's not where you hope to be some point in the future, I think it will prepare you to do what everyone has said here, and that is keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and be ready for the to recognize the opportunity when it comes. Barbara's career path certainly illustrates not every opportunity looked like it had a capital O on it at the time when it came along, but in retrospect, that's what it was. So I do think that being satisfied to do the best that you can every single day, even if it's not ultimately what you hope to do at some point in the future, is very important, because if you can't keep your eyes on the job today, how will anyone be able to believe you can do it in the future?
Did you want to say?
Well, Barbara was talking about the leadership development program at GE, and you may find yourself in a place that doesn't have one. It's your job to develop yourself. I think that a woman's tendency is to get good grades and put your head down and work hard and hope somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder. And in my experience, that it sometimes happens, and that's great. But sometimes you have to actually develop yourself, and I think the workforce today expects you to develop yourself. So if you're not in a place that's going to train you in management, you can learn through community service, serve on boards that train you as how to be a director, take courses in management on the side, read about management skills, because you'll find yourself someday supervising lawyers without any supervisory training in many cases. And it's not intuitive. So do the best to take your own career in your own hands and develop yourself, and know that that's your responsibility, not your corporation's.
That's a wonderful series of comments, and the word opportunity has come up a lot in talking about what has made each one of these women so successful. I wonder if you could spend just a few minutes talking about what you saw were your biggest challenges.
Well, I'm the oldest person on this panel, so I'll start with that, because I think my challenges may have been different from those that you all are facing today. Truly believing that you could go to law school and that there would be a traditional law firm career out there was a hard sell for me within my own head. After all, I was trained as a teacher, and I had a daughter and a wonderful husband and life in Clarksburg, so I was about to move my cheese. And I was doing it with what I had to determine was either permission of my husband or support. It turned out very much to be support, of course. But to me, selling myself on this was probably the hardest part of the job. Once on the path, I loved the law. I still love the law. I love the whole idea of the law, and there was never any looking back. But putting the toe into the water to test the temperature was, in many ways, a very frightening experience for me, and one that I feared could cause my personal life to go awry. And my personal life was the most important part of my life and still remains that way. And so I didn't want to, I feared what could happen. I've been very blessed in my life as a consequence of having gone ahead and jumped in, but perhaps for me that was a little more of a rigorous self-examination than it would be for women today, and I think that's a good thing for women today.
I think one of the problems that many women have, and I had this problem myself, and it is a challenge, is accepting help from other people. So often we type A'ers, think we control everything, and we want to control outcomes and results and process and getting there, and you forget that you just are one person. And, you know, thinking that there's nobody in the world that can better help raise your kids, what a dumb notion is that? I had no business staying home with my children, and I had a wonderful sitter who helped me raise my children, along with my husband, and my children are better for it. And in the law firm, allowing people to help you learn your trade, help you make your connections and your networking. I was not from here. And most people who know me now probably don't know that, because I know a lot of people, I've networked, and just like everybody that's been here all along. But you have to allow people to help you. You have to allow mentors, you have to allow helper people, I mean, whether it's a cleaning lady at your house or someone that's going to help you professionally. People in the community on the boards where you may serve will show you a different aspect of your community that you may not have seen before. You have to be willing to let those people help you. And if you don't, then that's a challenge that you're never going to overcome.
The challenges are many. One of the things that all of you have mentioned really throughout the panel discussion is networking and mentors. And I wondered if you could comment a little bit more on how to build networks and how, if you don't have a mentor, how can you create one? What is it that you can do in an organization or in a law firm or outside in an association or the other kind of professional situation? How can you invite someone to mentor you?
I think the first thing that, as I look back on it, the term used to be you've got to have a rabbi. You do have to have a rabbi. You have to have someone for whom you're indispensable and someone who is helping guide you. It may not be called a mentor, but regardless of where you find yourself in a position, you have to find that person. They're not going to reach out and find you. And it's just by knocking on the door, asking for help. Women in particular are not very helpful to other women. I hope you all don't agree with me. But in general, men are very accustomed to pulling young men along with them, and women have to struggle to have those relationships and have. The best mentor I ever had was a general counsel who made you lead without authority before he gave you a position. He put you in a role, said, here's what I expect you to do. I'm looking at you for the senior position, but they don't know it, so you have to get them to perform. Another thing that he did was when we went to, we were speaking in an EPRI conference, and I had written a speech at his request and had given it, and they had a golf outing. And as it turned out, when we got there, the golf outing was a club that didn't allow women to play. And he didn't tell me about it. He just went and got a tee time at a nearby golf course, and he and I went and played. So find the people who will support you and who will do those kinds of things because they really want you to succeed.
You know, I've thought about this after I got the dean's question about mentoring, and had never really thought of myself as having a specific mentor at any place in the process. But then the more I thought about it, I realized that I had a pretty rich series of mentors, even if they didn't think of themselves in that way. One thing that I try to tell my children in their life, and I think it applies to any career path, is that every single person you meet can end up being the most important person in your life from a professional standpoint. I mean, I think of the young man who then was at the Treasury Department, sort of low level, who ended up being the person who pretty much determined my career path by him remembering working with me. I think of the people who I now, looking back, think of as mentors. It's really, part of it is just studying and observing them and what made them successful, learning from them, because that's really what mentoring is. I don't know that I ever thought I had someone who really took me under their wing and protected me, because that's not really what I wanted. but I did have a lot of people who were willing to spend the time when I reached out to them to tell me what worked for them and how they thought about things and how they approached problems. One of the big struggles I have now is I have an assigned mentee. Is a junior, one of our junior international tax counsels, and trying to figure out how I can really help in the development of her career. My first reaction is, well, I'll get her promoted. I'll get her what she wants, sort of this goal-achieving type mentality I have. And then I realized that really wasn't it. Instead, I started a process of interviewing everyone she worked with, all the senior people, what they viewed as her pluses, what they viewed as her strengths, her weaknesses, talking with her, helping her without telling her about those talks, getting her to focus on how to develop things, how to emphasize strengths. So if I had to say one thing about mentoring is that it's every single person you meet could be the person who teaches you or introduces you to something that's key.
If I could just add one more thing, it's interpreting what's going on that as a young person you don't know. What just happened? Why did this work? How did I screw up here? Why did they have that reaction to what I did? And to me, that's the value of the mentor. The first example was I had a first role as a corporate secretary. The CEO said, "Oh, we really need all of these changes. You just go for it. Change it all, the whole board materials package." So I did. And the thing came sailing over the transom. Back, whoosh, with like a hurricane. It seized it and slammed it back on my desk. So I went into this general counsel, my mentor, and I said, "What did I do wrong?" He said, "He meant baby steps." That's what the mentor can tell you. He did not mean change as you thought of it. He meant baby steps. So,
one area that I want to touch on when we close, and then I want to open it up to questions from the audience, is that there have been some key words that I've picked up on as we've gone through this conversation. I want to mention a few of them and then give each person an opportunity to say something that wraps up anything that she wants to communicate. So I've heard the word courage mentioned. I've heard the word risk-taking. These are characteristics, I think, of what we're identifying as success, as key to success. Courage, risk-taking. One of the words I heard was strategy. Maybe don't have a plan, but be strategic, or be strategic about your plan. I want to turn it over to all of you now for one last comment, if there's anything else that you'd want to communicate to the group before we take questions.
I'll start. And one of the things, courage obviously is very important. I think I had said don't be afraid, and many times people who mentor you are your mentors because they have more confidence in you than you have in yourself. And you have to pay attention and spot that when you see it. But one of Irene's colleagues on the federal bench once called me and asked me to serve on a committee that was a short-term committee, but it was very time-intensive. And I had 3 screaming kids at home, and my career was going strong. I was trying cases everywhere, and I tried to tell him that I was too busy. And finally, I said, it's very hard to say no to a judge. So I finally said, okay, I'll do it. He said, okay, good. I'm so glad you'll do it. Now, you be the chair. I said, wait. I was on the fence about doing this to begin with. And he said, Susan, you've got to understand one thing. He said, first of all, you can do this. And number 2, it's actually easier to be in charge because you set the meeting dates, so you never miss a meeting. You set the agenda, so you know how things are going to go. He said, trust me on this. It's really easier to be in charge. And I had never heard that before, and I thought, it's nice that he has confidence in me that I can do it, but he's also right. There are benefits to being in charge. And so don't forget that along the way.
being a lawyer is a tremendous, tremendous honor, the ethical piece of it, and an opportunity and a pleasure. It's hard work. but you're meeting people. The avenues for advancement or interest fulfillment are limitless. Never stray from the path of keeping on and trying to do it, because it will challenge you throughout your career in new ways that you never thought possible. It'll enable you to support your family, which is one of the most important things. I worry about people who think they'll get rich being a lawyer. I think we see them in prison a lot. On the other hand, you will be able to make enough money to support your family, to pay your mortgage, to get your kids in school, and have a wonderful life. So I just wish you the best and urge you to keep going. It's a tremendous career. Sorry I'm ending it soon.
One of the things about being a federal judge is I don't have to end it until I'm called home. But it's actually a lifetime appointment, and it's something that I can plan to end or choose not to. So from that respect, being on the bench is a wonderful career alternative for a woman in particular, although I would say to you it doesn't really mean that your hours are any fewer at the end of the week. But love the law. Please love the law. I think so many women look at the law as a means to another end. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you don't love the law, if you don't pursue the law with the passion that comes with being a professional, you will miss out on whatever the gift of life is for you out there. If you love the law, no matter where you're planted, you're going to bloom, and you will move on, and you will move up. People who are fulfilled do that. They hear the invitation, they seek the opportunity that when the door opens for them. But if you're unhappy in what you're doing, if you're displeased with the kind of work that you're doing, if you feel that there's no value to it, that opportunity, no matter how you plan for it, will never occur for you, because you're not the person whose persona, if you will, is going to invite the opportunity into your life. So make sure that you're doing the law for the right reason, or else use your training here for the best purpose that you can find that will make you a giving and productive member of society. At the end of the day, we're all called to do something productive, to give back to our communities that have given so much to us, and particularly here in West Virginia. I think that's tremendously important. You will do that best when you feel that you are fulfilled in your profession.
I don't know if I have anything particularly sage to add at the very end. That's always a nervous place to be. I will say that I absolutely love my job. I mean, I like going to work. I like doing it. I find it fascinating. And if I could wish anything for all of you, that's what it would be, that you would end up somewhere where you feel that about what you do. I do want to give a plug-in for government service. I don't know about so much on the state level, but clearly on the federal level, if you have an area that you're really interested in, working in the government, whether it's in the congressional or the agencies, can give you amazing experience and amazing inroads and amazing contacts. So it's something I'd keep in mind.
Great. Now we're going to be open to questions, and if you have a question, we'd like you to come to this microphone.
Hi, my name is Jenna Martin Emerson. I'm one of the faculty members here, and I just want to say, as one of the faculty members, thank you so much for coming. This has truly been informative. I actually have two questions, which you can feel free to ignore or answer as you like. The first one has been sort of alluded to, but as I found when I was working as a government lawyer, was this idea of women and self-selections, particularly self-selecting out of opportunities and promotions. I noticed that when it came time to apply for, say, a branch chief position in the government, the men who'd been there for about 6 months were like, yeah, I can do it, no problem. Whereas the woman was like, well, I'm not sure, I don't know. And I guess my question was, do you find that to be true? And if so, how do you, as a woman, get around that? Like, what do you sort of do or say or do to position yourself in a way to take advantage more of the opportunities that come by? And then the second questions were specifically to Ms. Maddox and Ms. Combs regarding corporate opportunities. I teach corporations. I teach business law here. And I've noticed that that is particularly a place where there is tremendous opportunity and many, very few women in there. And again, I would like to sort of, if you have any advice on how to counsel women in particular to take more advantage of these. Thank you.
Be a tax lawyer. Learn to love tax.
Or be a patent lawyer.
Or a securities lawyer. The SEC is hiring a lot of people if they ever get the money. And more people go from the SEC then into the law firms for 4 or 5 years, and every corporation needs securities lawyers.
You know, I found, in women wanting to grab opportunities, I think I would say that was somewhat true of me. I think it was true of a lot of the women in my generation of lawyers. I don't see it as much now. It's interesting. The women that I see starting to work up into the the kind of work that I do. The women at GE, I mean, they are gung-ho, and they're grabbing opportunities. It's a unique mix of confidence and humility, and you have to have them both. But I think it's changing.
Yeah, in the corporations that I worked for, there were wonderful opportunities for women, tremendous. You have to have spent a period of time in a large law firm because in large corporations, typically they don't train new lawyers. Or if they do, I don't know what jobs they have, but the typical path is work in a large law firm, then come to a corporation. But the opportunities are huge. Senior executives all over the place are lawyers not practicing law, but because they're so smart and so well trained, they have worked their way into senior level management positions. So absolutely. And they're also very diversity oriented. So they're very conscious of making sure that women are promoted along with men. So it's a great environment for women.
I'd like to comment on your self-selection issue that you raised, which is still a problem, I think. I agree with Barbara. It's not as bad as perhaps 10 years ago, but it's still a problem. And I think one of the problems is perhaps a lack of courage and self-confidence, perhaps a lack of a mentor to say, you have to do this, or you can do this. Some women just don't have someone with that kind of confidence in them to say that to them. And that's our job. That's people like us. Our job is to go to those people that have that ability and have that promise and say to them, you can do this. Just because you don't have every single detail worked out on how this is going to play out doesn't mean that you can't be successful going forward. But I think self-selection is a problem. I think it's becoming a problem with men, too.
Well, I'll just add the one thing. You're going to have that doubt. It's just part of who we are as human beings. But when the stomach starts to churn and everything else, you just put one foot in front of the other and keep moving on and write the letter, make the phone call, knock on the door, whatever it takes. It's not, I think women are naturally humble and think, oh, I can't promote myself. Well, hello, if we don't do a little bit of that for ourselves, guess what? No one else will either. So you have to have the courage of your convictions and also a perception of yourself that you're worthwhile and you can do it because guess what, ladies, you can.
One of the companies I worked for, all the leaders played golf. Golf outings everywhere. I didn't play golf. I was tired of being left out, so I learned to play golf. I love to play golf now. In my retirement, I'm going to be one of the best golfers you ever saw. But it wasn't a pain to learn to play golf, but it was part of being part of that culture, hanging out with, the guys. And it was wonderful fun. And building those social relationships is every much a part of your success as the working hard and doing the right project work?
I didn't play golf either, but I always volunteered to drive the beer cart and the one that had the board on it with the score.
We have time for one more question.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Jared Jones. I'm a third-year JD MBA student. So far, I think the discussion is kind of focused on women's career path after law school. But as I understand it, applications from women going into law school are down. And at that point, they're probably not even thinking about their post-law school career path. I would also say that there's a lot of negative press about law school nationally these days, and the image with mounting debt, hard to get a job. The Wall Street Journal reported that applications from this year's 1L class were down 10% across the nation, period. If women are self-selecting out of law school at an even faster rate, I'm not sure that that says anything except that women are smarter than men. If it does say something else, what do you think that is? Thank you.
Well, we know they are.
Maybe that's where we should end.
Well, does it also mean that law school is becoming very expensive, maybe too expensive, and that when we're in a time when the economy is flat, the idea of piling more debt on to the undergraduate debt that many of you already have is a very difficult decision to make when you're surveying the scene out there and seeing that law schools may not be hiring as much as they were in the past. And so perhaps we could look at this as a decision deferred. Of the women at this table, I mean, I didn't go to law school for 10 years after graduation from undergraduate school. Susan, you didn't go right away, did you?
I took a year off.
A year off. Barbara?
I took a year off.
Year off? Did you?
After college? Oh, straight in.
Straight in. Okay. So that you don't have to go right away. And in fact, when I'm hiring law clerks, and I suspect when Susan's hiring associates, it's not all bad to see that there's been a job out there. Somebody held on to a job and earned a living and understands a little bit more about the world than just, I've got to get up and go to class, but after that I can go hang out at Starbucks, and then I might study a little bit. But, you know, it's a little different in the real world, and I kind of like getting law clerks who know that.
I think that, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that perhaps it is an indication that law schools as a whole need to do a better job of explaining to potential incoming students the different career paths that are available. A traditional law firm career path or a traditional any career path. One of the things I thought about when I went to law school, I didn't really know what my career path was going to be. But I thought if I have to live this life, I'll be better living it with a law degree. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of how I made up my mind on what graduate school to go to. But I don't think law schools, and this is not a criticism, I just think it hasn't been a necessity that law schools at the front end explain to people what career paths are available. Not just women, everybody, because a traditional path is not for everyone. And that doesn't mean you can go into something that's so totally unlaw related, it's not even funny, but with a law degree, you're very effective in that position. And I think that's what Joyce is trying to do by starting with a panel like ours to show you 4 different paths.
And this has been an amazing panel. And I want to say again, thank you to all of our panelists. It's been amazing. I want to thank the panelists and all of you for being here today for this inaugural event for Women in Law and Leadership. I do want to say, just for a moment, a plug for West Virginia University College of Law. I think we're doing a lot in terms of leadership and expanding our horizons for what we need to be doing for incoming students, for students who are applying, for students who are here. We've been working very hard to keep our tuition down. We're still the lowest for in-state residents of any law school in our region. and we've worked very hard to do that. That means that everyone here in this building works extra hard because of it, but it's something we're very proud of. And I also want to put in a plug for a new course that Professor Hardesty, David Hardesty, has developed called Law and Leadership. And it is our attempt in the curriculum itself to actually focus on the synergy between being a lawyer and being a leader. Thank you again for being here, and thank you to our panelists.